Recording in progress.
Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in a few seconds. We'll give people a chance to get in. All right, welcome. My name is Rebecca Seaton. I use pronouns she and her, and I am a member of the West Hartford Community of Concern, which is composed of middle and high school parents raising awareness about youth mental health and wellness. This is one of several programs we are partnering with the West Hartford Public Schools on to bring you this year. You can check out our website for past programming, and many events have recordings. So if you want to check those out, you can. I'm going to put that right in the chat for people to see. There you go. For our next event, we are excited because we're planning a youth wellness fair for middle and high schoolers at Hall High School on March 23rd. It's going to have food and music and fun wellness activities for teens. So be on the lookout for that flyer. And we are very grateful for funding from West Hartford Greater Together Community Fund to support this work. For tonight's program about teen dating and relationships, I just want to start by sharing that I have 3 older teens. And so my family has been navigating our teens dating for a few years now. And honestly, it's been pretty tricky. To start, there are changes in relationship communication in the digital age that are very different from when my generation was growing up. For example, my parents knew that when I hung up the phone that was attached to the wall, I was done talking to my boyfriend, as opposed to today with social media and texting, kids communicate a lot more often out of sight and earshot. So a lot of kids also have relationships that are entirely online. Another aspect of this topic is that it has made me and my husband think about what we model as well, and that is goes well and not so well in our relationship and how that affects our kids. And of course, we want to impart on our kids the importance of recognizing and standing up to abuse and not always, and also not being abusers and rejecting the social conventions that can normalize that behavior. So when my parent group was planning around this topic, we went into many different subtopics, as one does with parenting. We know we won't be able to cover everything you will need tonight, but we hope that you keep this conversation going with your families and communities based on the information our speakers share. We will send a follow-up email with the recording and resources. So tonight we have slides from Interval House, and I will introduce the speaker who will do that in a moment. And then we'll get to hear from Jocelyn Tamburello Noble, who is Conard High School's interim principal. And she will share school resources, including how this topic is covered at school and what are the sorts of things that you can do around this that from the school's point of view. And several people submitted questions in the registration, so we'll answer them. And if you have questions during the program, please put them in the Q&A, and we will try to get to them before we wrap up at 8. So I would like to introduce now Emily Cinturino. She's the director of community programs at the Interval House, which is a Connecticut organization dedicated to providing services to break the cycle of domestic violence. You may not know this, but February happens to be nationally recognized as Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. And like many unsafe and unhealthy situations that adults can find themselves in, preventing domestic violence needs to start much earlier so kids and teens have tools to avoid it as they grow up. Parents are critical in helping children develop healthy relationships and provide support when they are in an abusive one. So during the presentation, you will hear the phrase teen dating violence, and Emily will explain how this includes all types of abusive behavior and how it can be found in relationships that are not necessarily romantic. This is not an easy topic, but it is important to understand the scope and depth of this problem in order to learn how to prevent it. So, Emily, will you take it away?
Yes, thank you so much, Rebecca and Jocelyn and the West Hartford community. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here to talk about this important topic. And of course, I just want to preface this by saying that some of the material that we talk about in the topics can be rather triggering and graphic. So if there's anything that is a little bit too close to home or difficult to hear, please do what you need to for those moments. Step away, take a few moments, because ultimately mental health is the most important thing. And I also want to preface it by saying, too, that this is an uncomfortable conversation even for adults to have. So please don't feel like you are alone in this as parents, guardians, educators. This is a conversation that's very difficult. So I hope by the end of this, you can at least gain the knowledge that starting these conversations sooner is ultimately the most important thing we can do. So I am going to share my screen to pull up a PowerPoint presentation. It is a lot of information that I've tried to condense as much as I can. So at the end of it, I will talk about resources. And on the intervalhousect.org website, we also have a ton of toolkits, informationals, presentations specifically for parents and educators and teens as well. So if it feels like this has been an overload of information, please feel free to go to the website to see all of that information on there as well. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen, Rebecca? I just want to make sure when I did that.
I can, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay. So, of course, the topic that we're going to be talking about is teen dating violence. Like Rebecca said, February is Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month. For those of you who don't know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So, those are two of our busiest months, really trying to be out into the communities, raising awareness and education on these very important topics. Like I was saying, some of it can be triggering. Typically, if I'm doing these presentations in person, like I said, I tell people to step outside, take a moment, but for the purposes of Zoom and technology, if you need to log off, I know Rebecca said this will be recorded, so please do what you have to take care of yourself. So, first and foremost, what is teen dating violence, right? So, it is a pattern of abusive behavior in a dating relationship where one partner uses power in an attempt to control and coerce the other. There's always two words that I really try to emphasize in these presentations, which is power and control. And that can really take many different forms. Every relationship and situation is going to look completely different. It's really not a one size fits all. Anybody can find themselves in a violent relationship, anybody can be an aggressor. So it's really important to keep that in mind too. Like I was saying, abusive behavior can take many different forms, and it can often leave people feeling scared, confused, dependent, and insecure. Approximately 1 in 3 high school students experience physical and or sexual violence by someone they are dating. Statistically speaking, if there are 30 students in this room per se, because we're typically doing some of these conversations with students directly, that means 10 of them will experience teen dating violence. These are the statistics from last fiscal year, so we do need to update them, but I still think it's a pretty staggering number to keep in mind when thinking about teen dating violence as a whole and what that means for your children, your students, and the people closest to you. Nearly 70% of women who have been abused by a dating partner first experienced abuse between the ages of 11 to 24. We learn how to respect and love ourselves through interactions with other people at a young age. This is also really important too, because one of the educational pieces that we're beginning to offer is presentations with the younger students, elementary schools, middle schools, to really even highlight what it means to be a good friend, how to respect others, what it means to set boundaries, identifying safe people in your life. A lot of people think they need to wait until teens or children are a certain age to have these conversations, but setting that foundation at a young age, even with the basics, can really make a difference as students, children begin to grow up. In the LGBTQIA plus community, less than 25% of those who experience dating violence ever report the abuse. And only 33% of teens experiencing dating violence tell anyone about it. So, again, this highlights the shame that goes into identifying as someone who's in an abusive relationship. We know that it can be really difficult to come forward and share what someone is experiencing in their personal life, especially when it comes to those intimate partner relationships. And not just for those who identify as male and females, but those who also are in the LGBTQIA plus community. And there's many more barriers that exist for those communities as well too. So it's always important to keep that in mind, that if your child, a student, is experiencing violence, the chances that they're fearful or nervous to come forward is typically high within this percentages, just due to maybe the fear, the uncertainty, the confusion, especially with younger kiddos, to try to determine what they're really experiencing, how to handle that, and how to even approach that conversation themselves as well. Like I was talking about with the LGBTQIA plus community and the youth, 43% of LGBTQIA youth and 29% of heterosexual youth reported being victims of physical dating violence. 59% and 46% reported emotional abuse from a dating partner. 37% and 26% of heterosexual youth versus the 37% of the LGBTQIA youth reported cyber or phone abuse and harassment. And then 23% versus the 12% youth have reported sexual coercion. So, of course, this shows the correlation. And again, these are just based on the numbers that we know. I always think it's important to remember that this is just what we're able to gain from a small perspective. We don't have the full picture, of course, because not everybody is going to report what they're experiencing. And some people might not even know that they're in a violent relationship as well. But this slide highlights those correlations, the differences between those in the LGBTQIA plus community versus those who identify as a heterosexual person. And of course, just due to the differences in reporting, those barriers, feeling safe to report, being able to identify a safe community is really what this highlights as well. Transgender youth, the percentages are significantly higher than for lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth, and much higher than the heterosexual youth. 89% have experienced physical dating violence, 61% have been sexually coerced, 59% have been emotionally abused, and 56% have suffered cyber and phone abuse and harassment. And I know the numbers can seem like a lot, and I apologize if it feels like I'm reading the slide, but sometimes seeing the numbers can resonate a little bit more with people, especially when, we're talking about our kiddos, our students, children. It's important to really see how different communities, how different kiddos are being impacted by violence. And of course, the BIPOC youth. So, Black women, girls, and gender expansive youth are not often seen as victims of violence, right? So, research has said that Black women ages 18 and 19 not only consistently report high rates of teen dating violence, but racialized gender expectations deter them from sometimes seeking help, reaching out, reporting the abuse. Stereotypes like the superwoman or strong Black woman leaves Black women under the pressure to be strong and not seek support, also increasing their risk for dating violence. And this can also leave Black, trans, and non-binary youth vulnerable to a specific erasure as well. So now I'm going to talk about the different types of abuse. Now that we're very aware that intimate partner violence can impact anybody, which is really one of the most important takeaways. It's also important to know what the different types of abuse are. Typically in society, we're very aware of the physical abuse, right? That's really what's highlighted in the media, in movies, in music. And it's typically the one that people talk about and even think about when they think of intimate partner violence, teen dating violence. Physical abuse comes to the forefront. So, of course, physical abuse is any intentional act causing injury or trauma to another person by way of bodily harm. It can come in forms of hitting, inflicting bruises, strangling, dragging someone, tying someone down, or restraining them. You might see black eyes, busted lips, red or purple marks, sprained wrists, bruises on their body. We also have verbal abuse, which some people might refer to as emotional abuse, psychological, or mental abuse. Those all kind of fall under one category. This is a destructive form of communication used to harm the self esteem of a victim in order to control them. So it could be name calling, insults, screaming, blaming their partner, minimizing their feelings, threats of any kind, name calling. So it's really important to have these conversations because there are many teenagers out there who might not realize that what they're experiencing is verbal abuse, mental abuse, psychological or emotional abuse. So that's why having the educational piece about this too and raising the awareness about the different types of abuse can allow us as parents, educators, and even teens to start thinking about, is my relationship healthy or unhealthy? You know, maybe I've experienced name calling, but I never thought that meant I was in an unhealthy relationship. So it really can get the brain to start turning, us to start having internal conversations to really think about what this relationship is to me and if it's healthy or unhealthy. Emotional abuse, you know, like I was saying before with the verbal abuse and psychological, any intentional behavior that results trauma, anxiety, depression for the victim. It could be extreme jealousy, ignoring or dismissing, denying or minimizing, gaslighting and manipulation, bullying, blaming or shaming, isolation from the people closest to them. Sexual abuse, forcing or coercing a victim to engage in sexual activity without their consent. This can also mean making someone watch pornography, knowingly transmitting STIs, sexting without the other person's consent, and even using date rape drugs. Again, this can be, you know, difficult to talk about, especially with teenagers and kids, but it's important to know that sexual abuse can take place, and it doesn't have to be in one form. It can be, you know, sexting without consent. And again, just making teenagers aware of the different types of sexual abuse that can exist, that they can experience, again, is really important when having these conversations. Also, technological or digital abuse. Of course, this is such a big portion of conversations that we're having with teenagers as of lately. The use of electronic devices and social media to harass, monitor, and control another person. So, this could be excessive calls and texting, demands to check in, GPS monitoring, uses of social media check ins to track someone, using social media to humiliate someone, and demands for sexting. It can also be catfishing or spoofing. Even with some of the older kiddos that I've worked with, some of the college students, you know, their partner might be monitoring their email communications, who they're talking to. They might have their location all the time, their passwords to certain social media or their cell phone. So that's important to keep in mind too. Um, Stalking is also something that can take place. So it's a course of conduct that can escalate to be violent over time. A stalker may repeatedly contact, approach, monitor, or follow you despite you not wanting them to. Unwanted phone calls, approaching the person repeatedly without consent, showing up uninvited to their home, workplace, or school, sneaking into the person's home, doing things to scare the person. So now that we know those types of abuse, again, they are physical abuse, emotional, verbal, psychological, kind of that one size fits all, sexual abuse, and digital abuse. There is one other type of abuse that we talk about with anybody 18 and over, and that's financial abuse. We typically see that a lot more with adults and older people. So now that we know about the types of abuse, what are the signs we can look for? So Abusers may be temperamental, charming one moment, angry the next. They might be irrationally jealous of other people in your life. They might be overly demanding of your time and attention, isolating you from your friends and family. They might intentionally damage your relationships with others, including your family members, friends. They might make you feel bad for going to work, school, or make you feel bad for seeing your family or friends. And so, what can we look for when it comes to those warning signs? Is your child spending less time with their family or friends? Are they not participating in extracurriculars or the hobbies that used to be really important to them? Are they constantly excessively texting, calling, emailing, or spending time with their partner? I know too, this can be a tough one for people because it seems like everybody's on their phones now. Even adults are kind of attached to their technology, right? So it can be hard to kind of decipher how much time is my child really spending on their phone. So having that conversation with them about boundaries, privacy, what to look for, and of course, if the other signs exist as well, that's when it's definitely worth a conversation. Of course, too, if you notice that your child can't go 10 minutes without checking their phone, or their behavior starts to change because they're nervous that if they don't check their phone, their partner might be angry with them, big red flag. Maybe their grades are declining, or they're missing school. They might have pressures from their partner about who they can see, how they should act, or what to wear. They might have injuries from their partner that they're trying to cover up and can't explain. Or they have fears about upsetting their partner, or they're constantly making excuses for their partner's behavior. I am going to attempt to show this video. I think I need to make sure that I'm sharing with sound.
I'm only checking your phone because I want this relationship to last.
Go change your clothes.
I just want to make sure we can hear it.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I'm only checking your phone because I want this relationship to last.
Go change your clothes. I can't have my partner look better than me when we go out.
You look like you gained weight. Maybe you should skip a meal. Why would you hang out with your friends when you could be spending time with me?
We need to be on the phone tonight so I know when you're going to sleep. I had my friends catfish you to make sure you weren't cheating on me. I broke the condom so we'd be together forever.
You are the most pathetic person I know. Your family doesn't love you.
I'm the only one who could ever love you. Why weren't you where I told you to be after school? If you have sex with me, I won't.
Out you to your parents. I threw away your college acceptance letter. You don't need it anyways.
It's my job to provide and take care of you. I can't trust you being with anyone else.
I know you're cheating on me. I can't prove it.
I slapped you because you shouldn't talk to me like that.
You should have more respect for me.
I can't have me. No one can.
If you break up with me,
I kill myself.
I'm gonna hurt you. You're worthless.
I experienced the emotional, mental abuse, financial abuse, isolation, manipulation, controlling, physical abuse, and sexual abuse. I'm Maya Pribble, and I'm a survivor of teen dating violence. I think the cycle of abuse, it starts with the honeymoon period and the gifts and taking me out to eat. And then it started with the emotional abuse and the little comments here and there. And then something big would happen, and it would be a really big escalation of verbal abuse or sexual abuse. He would wrap me back in by telling me that he loved me and he's sorry and he didn't mean it. And I would try and call him out on the things that he did, like, you raped me. And he would say, no, I didn't. I would never do that. I love you. I always had the excuse of love. Love means that you can do whatever you want to your partner, and I didn't realize that that was wrong. I knew something was wrong about it, but I didn't know how to fight it. I was getting ready to go to post-secondary school for my senior year of high school. I was watching those training videos on sexual violence. They had asked a lot of questions like, are you experiencing this or that? And I checked all of the boxes. And I knew that in that moment that I was definitely in an abusive relationship and everybody was right. I had this mentality that I had to prove everybody wrong. But in that moment, everything came crashing down. I just have this drive to be able to help other victims and survivors, to let them know that it's okay, I've been through this and you can get through this. So I think that's how I'm able to talk about it, just because I know that it'll help so many other people by sharing my story and just letting them know that there is hope. There is hope, and you can survive. You are a survivor, and you will overcome this.
So I think that video is really important. Of course, it highlights one person's personal experience, but I think there's a lot of takeaways, especially in the beginning. You know, it starts with the honeymoon phase. And I think, as she describes in the video, she thought that love meant their partner could do whatever they want. And I think it's important, as we kind of talk about healthier relationships too, to talk that through with our kiddos, our teenagers, if we're noticing those things, or even if we're not, starting those conversations early. What does a healthy relationship mean to you? What does a healthy relationship look like? What boundaries am I going to set in my relationships moving forward? Some of the complexities of intimate partner violence, it's typically not a single incident. It can happen repeatedly despite apologies and attempts to smooth things over. It's not just physical abuse. An abuser may make you feel very loved at first, but the attention can turn into a controlling behavior. A lot of people use that word love bombing, right? Those constant acts of love, showing love, and it really is something that can take place in relationships. The abuse can often escalate over time. So typically in abusive relationships, again, it's different for every situation, but when you first meet someone and you start dating, you get connected, it's typically, like she was saying, the honeymoon phase. Things are really great, and slowly over time, kind of like a slow burn, a person can try to control, isolate. They might become really jealous, can start to chip away at that person's self-confidence, to start to try to assert power over different areas of their life. And of course, leaving may not end the abuse. Sometimes people take more extreme actions when someone threatens to leave that relationship, or they do. So when it comes to healthy relationships, what do we mean? So a healthy partner encourages you to achieve your goals. They don't resent your accomplishments or make you feel guilty for spending time with other people, and they aren't excessively jealous. Is my relationship healthy? There is typically an activity we do with the students in person. We set up all these signs and we give them scenarios and have them determine, should I stay or should I go? Really, is this healthy versus unhealthy? So for a teenager specifically and students, we would say, ask yourself, does your partner respect you and your individuality? Do they make you feel safe being open and honest with them? Does your partner support you and your decisions, even if they disagree with you? Do you and your partner have equal say and boundaries that are respected? Does your partner understand and respect your need to spend time with friends or family? And can you communicate your feelings without being afraid of negative consequences? This is the quiz. Again, this is something on the Love is Respect page. I have this resource in the end too that anybody can take. They can answer these questions, and based on how they respond, Love is Respect will kind of say, your relationship sounds healthy, unhealthy. These are some things you should consider and talk about. They have a ton of resources, and they're a great resource to utilize with teenagers. I am just going to take a moment to pull up goodness. So this is a document that we've created through Interval House. It's called 10 Signs of a Healthy Relationship versus 10 Signs of an Unhealthy Relationship. These are available on our website. Comfortable pace, trust, independence, honesty, respect, quality, taking responsibility, kindness, healthy conflict, fun, versus intensity, possessiveness, manipulation, isolation, belittling, sabotage, guilting, volatility, betrayal, deflecting responsibility. So these are some of the things that we talk about with students when it comes to what is an unhealthy relationship, what might that look like versus what is a healthy relationship. getting help. So how can we help students? And also, where can students go to get help and resources? So I'm going to show a slide in a second, a document about conversation starters. First and foremost, you want to start these conversations when you have time to listen and respond and really engage with your kiddo. Let your children know that you're worried about them if you are seeing these signs. Ask them what their relationship is like for them. Are they afraid? And sometimes it can be really important to ask how you can help them. Again, as parents, it's a different conversation when it comes to adult, especially when it comes to danger, needing to reach out for help. But ultimately, we want to listen to what they're experiencing and validate those feelings. We want to learn more about what teen dating violence looks like. What are healthy and unhealthy relationships? How can I become as educated as possible so I can provide this information to my child? And we always tell parents to call the hotline if you ever have questions. If students specifically or anybody under the age of 18 does call the hotline, we don't work directly one-on-one with anybody under the age of 18, but we will refer them to other organizations that do. But we always encourage family and friends to call the hotline if they're looking for information about resources or just have questions. So I am going to pull up. So I will make sure that everybody has access to this too. So encourage open, honest, and thoughtful reflection. This is about how to talk about healthy relationships with teens. Be sensitive and firm. Of course, parenting a young teen is not easy. Find the balance between being sensitive and firm. Try to adapt to the changes faced by your child. Be willing to talk openly and respect differences of opinion. Understand teen development, right? Adolescence is all about experimentation. So knowing what's normal is critical to helping you better understand and guide young people. Understand the pressure and the risk teens face. Take a clear stand. Make sure young teens know how you feel about disrespect, use of abusive or inappropriate language, controlling behavior, or any forms of violence. Like Rebecca was saying, as a parent, an educator, a caregiver, a guardian, knowing how your interactions with your loved ones or other people in your life can really make a difference and how children perceive what love is and what a healthy relationship is. Make the most of those teachable moments, accentuate the positive. Conversations about relationships do not need to focus solely on risky behavior or negative consequences. These conversations should also address factors that promote healthy adolescent development and relationships. Of course, be an active participant in your young teen's life and be prepared to make mistakes. Like I was saying earlier, these are unconversations for even adults to have. So there definitely is a learning curve to navigate. How can I best approach this topic and how can I best have these conversations with my kiddos? There is also a toolkit on our website that I will make sure everybody has access to. Tips for parents. You can look for early warning signs. Like I was saying earlier, what can I do? Listen and give support. Accept what your child is telling you. Believe they are being truthful. Your child may be reluctant to share their experiences in fear of no one believing what they say. Showing skepticism could make your teen hesitant to tell you when things are wrong and drive them closer to their abuser. Offer your unconditional support and make sure that they know you believe they are giving an accurate account of what is happening. Show concern. You deserve to be in a relationship where you're treated with respect. You don't deserve to be treated like this. This is not your fault. Point out that what they're experiencing is not normal and remind them that everyone deserves a safe and healthy relationships. And ultimately, talk about the behaviors, not the person. For example, instead of saying she or he is controlling, you could say, I don't like that they text you to see where you are. Remember that they still may be in love in the relationship, so respect their feelings. Talking badly about your child's partner could discourage your child from asking for your help in the future. So again, talking about those behaviors and not the person specifically could really make a difference in how your child chooses to engage in that conversation. And again, these toolkits are available on websites, Interval House, Futures Without Violence. They are great resources. I highly encourage having the time to go check it out. These are some other resources that we typically highlight. So Interval House, we are the largest agency in Connecticut providing services to victims. Like I was saying earlier, we can't offer direct one-on-one services with youth under the age of 18, but we do educational conversations. We go into the schools, we go into the Human Services Organization, youth service bureaus to provide these trainings. And then we connect them with the social worker at their school or the social worker in the town, and make sure we have resources available to them to make them feel safe. We typically do some activities so they can kind of share how they're feeling without expressing it to us directly if they don't feel comfortable doing so. CT Safe Connect, that is the statewide hotline for intimate partner violence, the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Again, that is the organization that oversees Interval House and the other organizations across the state. So they are also a great resource if anybody ever has questions. Love is Respect. They offer information on healthy relationships for young adults. They have trainings, they have toolkits, they have videos, scenarios, activities, great informational. One Love Foundation, also another great resource, especially for educators, has resources and great videos to kind of depict, here's this relationship. What are our thoughts? What are your takeaways? What would you encourage this person to do if they were your friend? So a ton of great resources there as well. And then the last one, Futures Without Violence, which is where I pulled some of the information for today. So they have a ton of information for not just teens, but also adults. They're constantly updating their documents as well, videos, and they're just a really great resource to utilize if you as a parent are looking for information, or even if your teens are seeking some information as well. I am going to stop sharing, because that is my portion as of now when it comes to intimate partner violence, teen dating violence specifically, in my presentation.
Thank you, Emily. Put my face back on here. There we go. That was really helpful information and a lot. And so Jocelyn, we'd love for you just to talk about sort of the school side of things, because, kids, stuff comes up for kids at school, or stuff comes up at home, and parents need, somebody to talk this through and get help. And the school is always resourceful and helpful in a lot of ways that we don't even think about. One thing that I think about is, how do if I have my child, I'm concerned, and I don't know the family of the child that my child is dating very well, like how do I deal with that? Like, is that something the school can help with? So anyway, I'm just going to throw it to you and we'll hear what you have to say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Jocelyn Tamburello Noble, and I'm the interim principal at Conard High School. While I'm here in my Conard capacity, I also do work across the district with many of our community of concern and concerns parents of color, as we really look at youth programming across our district, and also how to support families and caregivers, but also at the school level in terms of, when concerns arise. So I will just say that the school is first and foremost your partner in this, and that whenever there is concern, to really first bring it to a school counselor. So if you're seeing, usually teen dating violence or awareness or, any of those pieces, it's not something that, it's a slow progression. So one of the things that we see is, we start kind of seeing, a change in physical appearance. We start seeing kind of a quietness. We notice a lot students kind of hanging out with one group and then all of a sudden isolated with one partner. So there are a lot of, there are first sometimes the physical appearance. There's also social differences. If you notice that your child or student had a great group of friends since third grade, and all of a sudden you don't see them hanging out or talking or texting with them, but you see them hanging out with one partner. That's, there are social pieces there, that, even if it's a small thing that you're noticing as a parent or caregiver, feel free to partner with the school to say, like, look, this is something I'm noticing. Like, is this something that, I should be aware of? If, the piece that we see is like the anxiety piece also with like the phone, when I was in high school, like Rebecca said, if I was on the phone with anybody, my parents knew who I was dating, and they could tell by a phone call when I was talking to them, how long I was talking to them. If your child seems really tired and they feel like they were really connected to someone and had to stay connected, or if you notice them becoming anxious with saying like, I have to respond to this person. There's a lot of pieces that we see with teens that, we really need to kind of just pay attention to. As a parent or caregiver, even a small concern is a big concern for us. So in West Hartford Public Schools, we really want to partner with you in the fact that, people bring things that they think are small to us, but I'm like, if it's a concern for you as a parent or caregiver, it is a concern for us. And even if it doesn't turn out, then the best case scenario is it doesn't turn out to be teen dating violence. But if you're noticing changes, whether emotionally, sometimes, things come out as anger or frustration or loneliness or isolation. Those are huge things that are, if you're noticing drastic pieces in those, like those are good times to reach out to a school counselor. If there's ever like text messages that you find or snaps or any of the social medias where you feel like there's threatening, there's a partner asking for pictures, there are things that are there, like, do not hesitate to, connect with us to say like, look, I'm concerned about this. Like, this is what I saw. Sometimes we get, reports, somebody will come to us and say, I was dating somebody and I shared a picture with them. And now that person's threatening that if I don't get back together with them, that something that picture is going to be shared. So any of those pieces that are really connecting to teen dating violence, like they're not small things. You definitely want to bring them to partner with the school. We also have an amazing, at both high schools, we have great school resource officers that really are able to help and support. And they meet with families about the information that they receive. They also can connect with the families, and sometimes they can work with them to be able to support as well. So we have a lot of different resources. We have clinicians that can also talk about healthy relationships with students, because sometimes students come to us and they're like, well, I'm not sure. Sometimes they're hesitant to talk to their parent or caregiver, but will come in and they'll say, is this okay? Like, is this, is somebody getting mad if I don't respond to somebody's text in an hour and then getting really angry at me? Is that okay? And so sometimes those are just conversations they kind of have even out in the hallways with us, but we want to make sure that kids are supported. We want to make sure that you as parents and caregivers are supported. We talk about an array of different topics in our classes and courses and community and in the community, but we want to make sure that if you have questions or concerns, that you do bring them to, a school counselor. At times we refer them to, they work with any of our clinicians. And if it rises to the point of teen violence or any kind of bullying or harassment, we certainly as administrators become really involved. And then we can also connect with our school resource officer. So we want you to feel that you have people, and this is not something that it's very challenging to figure out on your own with your family, right? So we want you to feel supported and know that you have other adults to help your child, but also you as an adult will need support navigating through some challenges.
Great. Thank you, Jocelyn. It's really reassuring to know that there's school people that you could touch base with as a parent, and then there's the hotline, Emily, that your group has, and people like you that we could talk to about it, and our friends. I mean, I think it's just nice to know that you're not alone in this sort of tricky area, because it comes on, and it's having gone through it with kids, it just is something so different. But let's get into some questions. We don't have any questions in the chat or in the Q&A, but if you are watching and you want to throw something in, please let us know. We did get questions before the event started from registrants. So let me just go through some of those. One is, this kind of is a question, well, for both of you, if this programming is great for parents, what about programming for students themselves? Emily, you described a lot of the work that Interval House does, but also, do you work in schools? Do you bring programs to schools?
Yes, definitely. So there is, similar to this, a teen dating violence presentation that we can offer both to educators and to the teenagers, the students, if you will. There's also a similar presentation for high school, for middle schoolers. And typically when we go into the high schools, we do some activities to try to get some more engagement. It's definitely difficult with teenagers, of course. People can be fearful to want to participate or speak up or share their experiences. So that's why sometimes doing activities to kind of force them to participate can be helpful. So we do a presentation like this. We include an activity, should I stay or should I go? We talk about different scenarios and ask the students to kind of decide if they would stay or if they would leave that relationship. We also have an activity where we can talk about relationships in the media that are highlighted, and if students think those are healthy or unhealthy. Of course, people that they might see on social media a lot and TV or movies that kind of get some participation. We also have some presentations on consent and boundaries, setting those boundaries in these relationships, what those healthy boundaries mean to you, what does consent mean? And then also another presentation about self-love, self-care, empowerment, because of course, like Jocelyn was saying too, these are difficult conversations to have, and parents, educators, adults definitely might need some support throughout that, and also the kiddos too. These are difficult things to address, and hard conversations to have. So making sure they know how to show themselves love, self-care, empower themselves, and different, coping techniques and things that they can utilize to debrief these conversations, if you will.
Great. And I know that there are pieces in the health and wellness curriculum that do talk about relationships. And so I don't have that information, but I can find out and push that out in our follow-up email so that we, as parents, but I think there's a lot of, for the West Hartford parents, there is a lot of that online. If you look up the curriculum on the West Hartford Public School website, you can kind of see what the topics are and when they're covered. But this, I think, comes up. But it's nice to know that there are programs that you can push in, like the ones you have, Emily, through schools to give a little more depth to this topic for kids.
Rebecca, I want to just also mention that our human relations classes here also have spoken about teen dating violence, and last year Senator Blumenthal came and spoke to our classes as well. We also partnered here at Conard with the Interval House in terms of providing some fundraising, but also being able to get more information out to students. So I wanted to share that as we continue to partner with the Interval House. There's a lot of information that's shared that's really benefited our students in both high schools.
And we are working right now to come back in March to do a series of events similar to like we did last year with Senator Blumenthal.
Great. That is a good partnership. So there is a question from an attendee, and it's, Jocelyn, it's a follow-up to what you were saying. It's, how do you manage privacy considerations should someone bring up possible abuse with school personnel?
So the privacy, so we are mandated reporters at school. And so, one of the pieces that we share with families and, parents and caregivers is if we do believe that somebody is being harmed or somebody is at risk of harming themselves, we do have to put some things in place and report it. But I would also say, as a parent or caregiver, if you're concerned about, harm, that's something we can certainly help with. The privacy considerations is, anything that we kind of help families with, the level of kind of confidentiality is really up to the families and caregivers. So I will say, like, you know, it's not, if there's a concern that's brought by a parent or caregiver, we don't always, we ask the parent caregiver, like, to what level can we share information, and what is the level of comfort that you have? So, there are some cases where it's myself and a clinician, working, and the school counselor working on support, and teachers have information that the student may need support, but they don't know specifics, as to, you know, the privacy pieces on that. And families and caregivers can also come and say, like, here's some situations, or here's some concerns, and kind of being able to kind of first start that. There are some parents and caregivers that are saying, like, there's something going on here. Can somebody check in with my child or my student? Because I know there's something here, but I'm not really sure what it is. Or they see snippets of things. So we're not going to ask you for all of the text messages if you're concerned if you're concerned about teen dating violence. But I will say that usually by the time parents are bringing us things, there's enough of a concern where there is a higher level of involvement.
Okay, thank you, Jocelyn. There's another question that we got earlier. It's a couple of questions that go together. Sort of how you want to give your child agency in spending time with that person they're in a relationship with, but you don't want, and privacy, but you don't, like, how much is too much? How much agency is too much? And this is a hard question to answer because I think it depends on the child and the age, but how much time should they spend together, for example? Are there any sort of baseline guidelines around that? And kind of how do you know when you're going, too firm and too hard about it versus kind of letting them do their thing, but feeling safe that they can handle it? Emily, you're kind of looking like you're nodding.
No, I was just going to say, Jocelyn, feel free to chime in as or Rebecca, I'm not a parent yet, so I'm definitely not giving the best answer here. I think the only insight or information I can offer is that, first and foremost, talking about boundaries with your kiddos when it comes to these relationships. Again, making sure that your child or you have this conversation. If you start to see that your child is spending every single day after school, or that's constantly what they're seeking to do, or it's all they're conversing with you about, or it's at the top of their mind every single day. And like Jocelyn was saying too, if you're starting to notice that physical appearance change, maybe they're not seeing their friends as much, I think that's definitely when those conversations should be had. It's really hard to say from a overall subjective point of view, this is how much time one person should be spending in that relationship per week. But I think if you start to see those warning signs, and you really start to notice those changes in your child, and like Jocelyn was saying too, if your kiddo needs to answer within 5 minutes, otherwise they're nervous that their partner's going to get angry, those red flags should be going off. And I think just setting those boundaries about how much time a week you're allowed to spend with your partner, on your phone, social media, can all kind of tie into what healthy is. Because ultimately too, we want teenagers and kids to remember that spending time alone with yourself, doing things for yourself, is also really healthy. You have to be the best version of yourself to give healthiness, love, compassion, respect to others too. So encouraging that with your teenagers too, about spending time with yourself, identifying what's important to them, and reminding them that they can still have these relationships, but it doesn't have to consist of all of their time 24/7.
Absolutely, Emily. And what we see in students, is really, it's not so much about what they're doing or how they're doing it at a certain point. It's really the drastic changes in past behaviors that you notice. So for example, if they were hanging out with a group of 5 and they were always going out with that group, and then they, start dating someone, and now it becomes complete isolation with this one person, right? There's drastic changes. I think social media and phones, and I have two teenagers at home. Social media and phones is definitely something to put limits on. We have a charging station in our home, and in our home, all of the phones, including mine and my husband's, are there, at 9:45. And so that's a piece that, you're kind of looking at as well. It's really setting healthy boundaries and modeling those for your children and students. But I also think one of the biggest pieces is having open conversations. Like, I think having conversations, if you can, even prior to relationships or dating, and asking them about what do they think is a healthy relationship? What does it look like? Like, how does it balance? Because I think that's one of the pieces that, all of a sudden your teen is dating someone and it becomes all consuming for them. And to understand that, like, there's some conversations, if you have ahead of time, really are helpful. Like, what are healthy relationships look like? What do boundaries look like? If you're uncomfortable with something, how do you respond? And how do you keep a balance of your life with school and sports and all these different things and still have a relationship, but still see your friends? So I think those are all really healthy conversations to have for parents and caregivers with their children or students.
Very good. And I would say that all those things are boundaries. Like, we think about boundaries sometimes just being the physical boundaries and, your body, and how to make sure that you are safe and healthy with your body. And those are really important, but also, the boundaries around your time and your, just sort of what's going on with your, kind of the way that you're being treated, and all those things are all about boundaries. I will just add, I had a situation with my one of my kids where that my kid was doing a lot of making sure that the significant other was checking in and being texting, and so my kid, I felt like, was going a little past the boundaries that were healthy and acceptable. And so I was doing guidance around, like, well, is that okay for you to do? And I think about the behaviors when your child is being maybe inappropriate, or even to the extent of being abusive. Like, it happens. And so I wonder if you have any advice about that. How do you, as a parent, when you worry that your child is the one who's acting out in an abusive way, what then?
So if a parent is coming with concerns about their child, we definitely have referrals to school counseling, to different counseling services and different pieces that are there, and sometimes it's understanding dynamics of relationships. Sometimes it's somebody getting, more intensive community support piece. So there's a lot of pieces that we see. And we also can support students in terms of how do they learn to manage emotions, because that's a big part of it as well. So as parents or caregivers see things and they're like, I'm not really comfortable with the way that my child is talking to this other child that they're dating, like, that's a piece that we can, help with or support with. That's also a piece where, sometimes it's, things go to extreme with the first dating relationship, and being able to talk about, like, what does healthy relationships look like? How can we support you in terms of the feelings and managing emotions? And it's also a lot of kind of modeling of when you speak to them about the relationship piece, like, talking to them about, like, what are the ways that we connect with each other and we speak to one another to show that we care. And sometimes bringing it back to a parent caregiver relationship really helps kids. Like, I have had so many students say, my parents or caregivers treat me like this, and that's how I knew that this was not okay. So I think, for parents and caregivers, don't ever underestimate the power that you have in your home and in your surroundings and the way that you interact with people or your partner, because kids watch it and that sets the standard for them in relationships.
For sure. Yes. And I think, sometimes, I think you might have said this earlier, Jocelyn, that kids are dealing with things, beyond the relationship and how they treat their significant other. Like, my child was dealing with a lot of anxiety in general. And I think that's kind of led to the checking in and the wanting to hear back quickly, you know, and so that was something we figured out. There is one more question. I just want to honor somebody who put it in the Q&A. It's about middle school age and asking what classes or workshops do you offer for middle school students for Sedgwick Middle School sixth graders, for example, because it's such a vulnerable age and they need to be educated. So I'm just wondering if you can talk about that age.
Just from Interval House's perspective, we can definitely offer a teen dating violence conversation presentation. We can definitely tailor most of the materials that we have to meet the needs based on what the school might be seeing or parents or educators are noticing. Definitely having these conversations with sixth graders, for example, can be rather triggering or alarming, especially if it's the first time they're hearing about teen dating violence or what that might look like. So we can definitely incorporate more so that healthy relationships, what that means for me, and kind of talking about the different types of abuse, what to look for, you know, making sure you have safe people in your life that you can talk to about these things, and kind of building it from there. But we definitely have the toolkit, the teen dating violence toolkit for middle schoolers and high schoolers, similar to the presentation that we did tonight. It's not as intense, but it does cover a lot of the same material. And I just wanted to go back to similar to what Jocelyn and Rebecca were saying, really exemplifying that respect or love or relationships at home can really make a difference. And I think, too, one important thing is don't wait until you notice something to start having these conversations, right? Make it part of a normal check in or routine that you have with your children, because the more comfortable they can feel hearing about this and talking about this, the more likely they will feel comfortable to share. You know, if they've never had a single conversation about what a healthy relationship looks like, and now all of a sudden we're trying to have that conversation, it could be really confusing and overwhelming. So starting those conversations regularly and earlier can definitely make a difference down the road, especially if you're seeing that your child is displaying some of these changes in behaviors since being in a relationship.
Great. It's never too early to talk about this and so many things that parents work with their children on. So thank you so much. We are getting to a little past 8. And I just want to say to that question about middle school, we don't have a middle school representative here, so I'm sorry for that. We don't have somebody to speak about what is being taught already around this, but it is great to know the Interval House has a relationship with the high schools, and that could maybe forge a relationship with the middle schools to get this programming in that grade level. Jocelyn, anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap up?
I just wanted to say that, you know, we have a great superintendent who's really committed to parent partnership as he works through and really has, you know, supported a lot of the community organizations and support in the schools. So we're really at a great place that if you don't have a resource or you're looking for resources, please connect with the school, your child's school counselor. We can help you connect not only for services and supports inside of school, but certainly with the community research resources outside of the school. So, you know, at any point, if you have concerns, please know that you have partners in this with you.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Emily and Jocelyn, for being here tonight. Thank you to WHCI for broadcasting this event. And we will be sending you all information about this online, and we'll say goodnight. So thanks for coming.